From News 4 New York, this is a special presentation, Decision 2013, the New York City Public Advocate Debate, jointly sponsored by NBC4 New York, Telemundo Nueva York, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York City Campaign Finance Board.
Good morning, everyone. We certainly welcome you today, and we welcome those watching us here on News 4 and online and listening on WOR and Radio Soleil. This is the Democratic Public Advocate Debate, an official city debate for the 2013 elections, administered by the New York City Campaign Finance Board. The CFB runs the city's landmark public matching funds program, which strengthens the role of average New Yorkers' small contributions and makes the candidates less dependent on large donors. The nonpartisan objective criteria for participation in this debate were set months in advance. And now the primary, about 2 weeks away. So let's get right to it. Joining me as co-host is News 4 New York's government affairs reporter Melissa Russo, and our panelists this morning, Telemundo Nueva York's longtime anchor, Jorge Ramos, and Wall Street Journal's Michael Howard Saul. I didn't mean you were old, Jorge. I'm just saying you've been around with us for a long time, buddy. Now let's meet the candidates who met the criteria for this debate. Reshma Saujani is a former deputy public advocate. Letitia James is a city councilwoman representing parts of Brooklyn. Kathy Guerrero is a college professor, and Daniel Squadron is a state senator representing parts of Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. We certainly thank you all for being here with us this morning. We do have a few rules. I'm sure you're familiar with them. You'll each have about 60 seconds each to answer the question unless otherwise instructed. We'll offer 30-second rebuttals at the moderator's discretion. And for those of you at home, tweet us throughout the debate using the hashtag NYC Debates. And so, candidates, are you ready?
Yes.
Let's go. I'll turn it over to Melissa.
David, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Good morning. You are running for the most controversial office on the ballot. Some call the public advocate a waste of time, saying the position should be abolished. In our research for this debate, we asked New Yorkers what they think the public advocate does. Let's listen to what they said.
I have no idea. I have, no idea.
It's bad, but I don't.
No clue.
No, what they've accomplished, no, not at all.
Basically, fighting government.
The New York City Public Advocate. I'll be honest with you, I do not know.
They don't really be doing too much for New York.
Well, I mean, that's different from a public defender, right?
He kind of collects a lot of concerns and kind of priority things from residents.
The public advocate is supposed to be the voice for the people with the mayor's office, with the controller's office, to make sure that issues are presented in a balanced manner.
So after seeing that, we want to make it crystal clear the public advocate is the community ombudsman, a watchdog for government who investigates and services the complaints of the people. The public advocate is first in line to succeed the mayor, and the office comes with a budget of about $2.2 million. So our first question is, why does New York City need a public advocate, and how will the city be different specifically after your 4 years in office? Speaking order, we should mention, was determined by a random drawing of names, and we will begin with Reshma Saujani. You'll have 60 seconds.
Sure. So when the charter first created the public advocate, it was supposed to answer complaints, and then 311 came along. So there's an opportunity right now to reinvent the office. When I talk to people and I ask them, what do you need to get by? I need a job. I want my child to have an education. I need a home. 46% of New Yorkers are living under the poverty line. That's 3.6 million people. That is the second largest city in America. They deserve better. They deserve a champion. And I will be their champion as the next public advocate. I will fight to create jobs. I will fight to make sure that our seniors have housing. I've already fought to make sure that our children have excellent education by getting educated in computer science education. Our women, children, immigrants, our seniors, they need someone who is going to wake up every day and fight for them, and I will.
Okay, Ms. James, 60 seconds.
Thank you. First, thank you for this opportunity. The Office of Public Advocate is a voice for those who unfortunately have not been heard. And as a member of the City Council, I've ensured that all New Yorkers' voices are heard, whether or not it was fighting special interests on behalf of everyday New Yorkers, whether or not it was standing up against this administration who sought to close schools, whether or not they wanted to close libraries in the city of New York. It was my fight in the City Council to preserve and build more affordable housing for those who are being priced out. I know that individuals in the city of New York feel that their government has been hijacked for special interest and for the connected and for the well-heeled. And as the next public advocate of the City of New York, I will ensure that all voices are heard and that all of their complaints will be taken very seriously, and that will change the direction of the City of New York for all people.
Ms. Guerrero.
First of all, I want to thank Channel 4 for having me here today. It's a privilege. I also would like to say hello to my 3-year-old daughter, Anna Rose, who apparently chose to watch Mommy this morning over her favorite movie, The Sound of Music. So good morning, Anna Rose. So the Office of the Public Advocate, much maligned, much misunderstood, and clearly, as you mentioned, a budget that's been eviscerated. But it's not sexy, and it's not hot to talk about, but the office is the ombudsman. You're actually supposed to pick up the phone and answer the questions to the issues, small and large, that New Yorkers might say, I have this problem, I got a ticket, my water bill's too high, I don't know where to turn. It's not sexy, but it's real. We're going to create the Office of the Public Advocate think tank, which is going to add an additional 50 people into the office for the low price of a computer and a desk. Research fellows, students, graduate students, harnessing the intellectual capital so I can exponentialize the reach of the office and do what, in fact, the office was meant to do: answer the calls to New Yorkers like you who have problems that nobody's answering.
Okay, and Senator Squadron?
Look, I think we saw in some of those answers, the public advocate does have the potential and the need to play a vital role in the city. You know, we have a big city government. It's more like a large state or even a small nation than a local municipality. That's where the public advocate comes in. You know, inevitably, there are large communities, issues, individuals that get left out, left behind, orphans in the political process. New York City has 12,000 kids in the foster system, 14,000 people or so in city jails. Last night, 51,000 New Yorkers went to bed homeless. 21,000 of them are kids. Public advocate is here because none of those folks have high-powered lobbyists. None have City Hall on speed dial. Its job is to take on issues that no one else has taken on in the political process and figure out how to get real results. You know, every New Yorker who accesses city services, who needs city government, often is faced with a bureaucracy that's not transparent, effective, or accountable enough. Public advocate's job is to go in there. It can't help 8 million people individually, but it can make a huge difference in the systems and the process we have.
All right, thank you. Our next question will come from Michael Howard-Saul.
The public advocate is a relatively new position in New York City government. There have only been 3 in history. What do you consider, and please be precise, to be the single greatest accomplishment of any of the 3 previous public advocates? Ms. Guerrero, we'll start with you. You have 60 seconds.
Yes, I think the ability of each of them in different ways to actually make New Yorkers care, to make New Yorkers feel like there was a voice for the voiceless, that when they had nowhere to turn, and in different ways, each one of them did that differently. Mark Green, a tremendous political voice. Betsy Gotbaum, an extraordinary ombudsman and policy voice. And Bill de Blasio understands that the real power of this job is on the ground with thousands of real relationships. So in different ways, each of them was effective in making a set of New Yorkers who had nowhere else to turn actually care about them and the office.
Was there any one real result that any of them produced?
I think many. I think that Betsy Gotbaum engendering the office with regard to the ombudsman, creating the fund for public advocate, I find that extraordinary, and Betsy did that with bells on.
Senator?
Look, I think each of them has brought something great to the job. I'm really proud that both Mark Green and Betsy Gotbaum have endorsed my candidacy. You know, as public advocate, Mark Green really took on a mayor and a city hall that needed to be taken on, got results when it came to the Citizens Complaint Review Board and the campaign finance system that we're all participating in today. Betsy Gotbaum was focused on those individuals who really are left out and helped improve the way that food stamps are delivered in the city, among helping thousands upon thousands of individuals. Bill de Blasio does things in his office that I would continue as public advocate. I put out a detailed plan for the office. It is focused on the scope and the resources that the office has, and a number of them are things that are continuations of Bill de Blasio's term, the oversight of the transition in special education that's happening today, the push to make sure the city is more open, transparent with its data, the way in which both he and Betsy Gotbaum focused on a child protective system with foster kids that's too often not effective.
Ms. Sajjani?
So I was the deputy public advocate under Bill de Blasio, and so I want to talk about the work that Bill did because he faced the biggest amount of challenge. His budget was cut, he had less staff. And one of the things that we did together was really build the fund for public advocacy. Some of the things that Daniel have talked about is the work that Bill and I did together on special education and Citizens United. But the thing that I want to highlight is that we have the second largest population of undocumented students. And the Peter Vallone Scholarship, which was the one scholarship that was open to help these children, was cut by the City Council. And Washington hasn't moved in implementing the DREAM Act, and Albany hasn't passed the DREAM Act. So we did something about it. We created the DREAM Fellowship, and we sent undocumented students to college, because I believe that the plight of these children, that is a civil rights issue of our time, and that's a hard thing to do, to stand up in government and say, let's do the right thing. And Bill and I did that together, and I'm proud of that.
You mentioned your former boss. Are you disappointed that he hasn't endorsed you?
I haven't asked for his endorsement.
Okay. Council member?
It was an honor and a privilege to file an amicus brief along with the current public advocate, Bill de Blasio, to keep open Long Island College Hospital open, to keep open Interfaith Hospital. We stood together to keep open a labor and delivery unit at North Central Hospital in the Bronx. In addition to that, we're joining forces to make sure that the hospital, St. John's and the Rockaways, remains open. I stood with Bill de Blasio as we challenged this administration on repealing the third term. It was wrong. It was illegal. It was in violation of the law, and it disregarded the will of the people of the city of New York. And I've stood with Bill de Blasio on quite a few things, including a landlord list of bad actors in the city of New York, slum landlords, and will continue to do that as the next public advocate. You see, as a former public defender and as a former assistant attorney general who has sued countless number of businesses who preyed upon immigrants in the city of New York, I will continue standing up on those who do not have a voice in city government.
Councilmember James, can you name an achievement by a prior public advocate that did not involve you?
So the Mark Green, when he challenged this administration in regards to ensuring that the office of the Independent Budget Office has an independent budget, he negotiated litigation on their behalf, which resulted in a settlement. I will do that to ensure that the Office of Public Advocate is restored to a budget something comparable to that which was under the leadership of Mark Green. $2.2 million currently is in violation of the charter. The Office of Public Advocate cannot perform their functions as indicated under the Constitution of the City of New York, and I would demand that the Office of Public Advocate be restored to a function so that they can perform their functions and listen to the people of New York City.
Thank you. Time's up. We now move on to Jorge Ramos.
Thanks, David. How would specifically you, as a public advocate, better serve New Yorkers compared to the candidates next to you? Mr. Squadron, 60 seconds.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what I've done in public service and what I plan to do in the public advocate's office, and let the voters decide. I was elected originally in an upstart campaign against a 30-year incumbent in a Democratic primary because I believed that we needed to demand more out of our state and local government. I have fought to get ethics reform passed into law while a state senator. I have gotten results on everything from helping the MTA create full-line reviews to improve bus and subway service to ending this administration's terrible policy of charging rent to families in homeless shelter. And I'm really proud that in this race, I've been endorsed by Chuck Schumer, the New York Times, and a broad array of leaders from around the city. As public advocate, I don't think that we can solve every issue in the city as much as I'd like to. What you can do as public advocate is take on those issues and communities that no one else is taking on and figure out how to get results for them,
Senator,
even if folks...
I want you to say something that you'll do differently specifically from the candidate next to you or a candidate on the podium.
Sure. I've put out a specific plan for the office. It has 4 bureaus: the advocate for the most vulnerable, the children's advocate, the accountability advocate, and the housing advocate. Within those, I have 20 specific ideas, and those 20 specific ideas in those 4 bureaus, I alone have proposed.
Ms. Ojani.
As I said, I'm the only one who's had experience in this office. And oftentimes when I hear the other opponents talk about the office, it shows why it's so important to understand what you really do and what you can do as the next public advocate. I was the first to kind of implement my new reinvention of the office to have 4 deputies, 1 for housing, 1 for education, 1 for jobs, and 1 for women and children. I know what it's like to deal with that office and not have the resources that you need to help people. I brought almost an additional $1 million in funding to that office to help immigrant entrepreneurs, to help undocumented students, to help small businesses that were struggling. And I will do that again as the next public advocate because as you saw from the screen, our taxpayers don't have the stomach to increase the budget. We have to show the difference that we can really make. When it comes to how I'm different than another candidate here on this stage, Kathy Guerrero supports stop and frisk. I do not. It is racist and wrong. I read a story today of someone who had been stopped 24 times between the time that he was 15 to 23. I am so proud that this city council has overrode the mayor's veto, but Kathy Guerrero has doubled down on her support of stop and frisk, and it's wrong.
You will get to answer now?
Ms. Guerrero, yes.
Ms.
You
Guerrero.
want to quickly respond
Yes.
to that?
I think that stop and frisk is a tool. It's a tool that has been abused, but a tool nonetheless. And I wonder anyone who thinks that the men and women of the NYPD who put their lives on the line every day, and by the way, I've been proud to have been endorsed by 23 law enforcement agencies around New York City. Anyone who thinks that they are racist and wrong isn't getting it. They're not getting that those two bills, although there's a problem, they are not the fix. Those two bills have diminished morality in 3 days. Those two bills have caused confusion and trauma and drama in a New York City public school that is it's a severe problem.
Time is up, Ms. Guerrero.
I don't think they're racist and wrong.
We need to
at
go
all.
to Ms. James to answer the original question there. How are you?
So how will it make it different from the candidate next to you?
Sure. So you have to look at my record. And if you look at my record, when I was a public defender, I represented countless number of children in the criminal justice system and victims of domestic violence. As a former assistant attorney general, I took on the NYPD almost 15 years ago, coming up with recommendations to reform stop and frisk. As a New York City Council member, I've passed the Safe Housing Act so tenants can have their homes repaired in the city of New York. I've challenged those individuals who would deny women choice, those individuals who would deny them health care in the city of New York. I've stood up on behalf of the closing of schools in this administration and prevented closing of schools in my district. I've stood up against this administration who would repeal the third term in violation of the will of the people. I've stood up against those interests, those special interests and powerful interests in the city of New York who have hijacked our government, and New Yorkers' voices are lost in the mix. My office, as the next public advocate, will continue that, standing up for everyday New Yorkers on behalf of those people and fighting back those special interests and those powerful interests in the city of New York, those well-heeled and well-financed and well-connected people.
Thank you, Ms. James.
All right. I believe, Ms. Guerrero, you should get 60 seconds to answer the original question, which was how, as public advocate, you could better serve New Yorkers.
Well,
And how will you make it
than
different?
your opponents.
Right. Well, you just found out. I'm running against three politicians who don't even know, even their best sense, how to answer a question when actually asked. I am different because I am the daughter of working class family. My mother and father, New York City public school teachers. My 6 brothers and sisters, teachers and firemen and cops. I am somebody's mother. I stand on the shoulders of giants. I am the unequivocal union candidate in a working class city. 47 unions and counting have wrapped their endorsements and hearts and minds around my campaign. I fight for small business owners because I know them, and mostly I'm an educator. I teach at Columbia and NYU. I have a doctorate in schools policy, and I know that parents have been excised, like every stakeholder, from mayoral control of the New York City public schools. In a word, I am the only person on the stage who isn't a politician.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Guerrero. Thank you, Jorge.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Public advocates, as you know, temporarily have to step in and succeed the mayor in the case of vacancy or incapacity. If this were to happen, what qualifies you to step in there and run this sprawling city, this sprawling bureaucracy, albeit temporarily? Ms. James, we'll start with you.
Sure. As someone who has the legal experience, as someone who has the legislative experience, and as someone who knows government on the inside and out, and as someone who has been in touch with working people all throughout the city of New York, that is why I've been endorsed by El Diario, Amsterdam News, Tenants PAC, NOW, the League for Conservation Voters, Planned Parenthood, and I would argue I am the labor leader in this race. I've been endorsed by just about every labor organization in the city of New York except NYPD, and that's because last week the city council was historic in standing up against abuses related to stop and frisk, standing up for the Constitution, standing up for rights for individuals who unfortunately who have done absolutely nothing wrong. 4 million people in this city under this administration have been stopped and frisked. We've engaged in racial profiling. It is illegal, and it was a proud moment to stand with members of the city council to override the mayor's veto. And I will do that as the next public advocate, standing strong on behalf of everyday New Yorkers.
All right, Ms. Guerrero, I put the question to you. In your last response, you touted how much of an outsider you are.
Yes.
Why should voters have confidence that if something were to happen, you could step in and handle the mayor's office, even temporarily?
Sure. You know, the whole point of it is that working class and middle class and even the working poor in New York City have been excised from power, from the own conversation of their own lives. There are many ways to come at leadership, and the single model that you only can be a leader if you actually have been in public office, well, I rebuke it. And New York City is about ready to rebuke it on a major level in every elected officer in New York City that's about to turn over. We have had enough of politicians. I push back against this dual narrative that says that your big money on this stage and all of your institutional backing and power somehow gifts you into center stage in New York City politics. I rebuke it. It's wrong. wrong. The working class have said enough. I say enough. With all due respect, I must respond. The 47 unions that have endorsed me, my working class armies, have said enough. The small business owners have said enough. And with all due respect, again, as a parent and an educator, parents and children and teachers and principals have said enough.
All right, Ms. Guerrero, that's it.
Thank you.
Senator Squadron, what qualifies you to step in and run the city?
Well, first, I want to reiterate the point that you made, which is this is a temporary period, and that's critical. And so what I would do is be sure to work with the current administration and elected officials at every level of government to make sure that New Yorkers can be confident that in that transition, while they chose who the next mayor was going to be, the government was being well run. The experience that I've brought comes from a couple of different places. I've taken on tough issues, the kinds of issues that a lot of elected officials and politicians will run away from, whether it was working with the city and the community to improve the plan for Brooklyn Bridge Park and move it forward, or much more profoundly, Irene and Sandy, which were very impactful in my district, not as impactful as some parts of the city, but where there were real gaps in the plan, and where I was able to work both with individuals in my district, with public housing residents, and with City Hall to fill in those gaps in those very, very tough days.
Ms. Salgiani, 60 seconds. What qualifies you to step in?
Well, the New York Times yesterday said that my vision was too broad. It was as broad as if I was running for mayor. So I guess that's an indication that what I've been talking about already prepares me for taking over if I have to. Look, we need an ambitious vision for the Public Advocate's Office. People are sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of the injustices in our city, the amount of people that are sleeping on the streets, the children that aren't getting educated, the fact that our NYCHA houses are breaking down. We need someone who's going to be bold and not just be the status quo. And we need more than shouting. We need someone who's going to actually go get things done. I have stepped up and taught underserved girls in our city how to computer program. They are working at Google, Twitter, and eBay as we speak. I have stood up and started teaching their parents how to computer program so that they can be getting jobs making $83,000 a year. I have stood up for seniors and said that we need to get them permanent housing. We need a bold, ambitious vision for this office, and I am proud that I have one.
Our next question comes from Melissa Rousseau.
Primary day is coming up really quickly, September 10th. Looking ahead to primary day, can you each take 30 seconds and share with us who you plan to vote for in the race for mayor, and please explain why. We'll begin with Reshma Saujani.
Melissa, I haven't made a decision yet. I am still watching, and I am personally curious to know about what people's economic vision is, because my biggest priority is poverty alleviation.
And when you make up your mind prior to Election Day, will you share your vote?
No.
Let me just ask you, though, you're running for an elected office where the sole mission is to advocate for the public.
Yes.
Don't you think that it's a fair question to ask you to share with us who you plan to vote for, who has the best vision for New York City?
I still think that people's votes are private, and you wouldn't ask that of another citizen. But I will say this, whoever is elected our next mayor, I am looking forward to working with them or having to argue with them if we differ.
Maybe a little of both. Ms. James, 30 seconds.
I haven't made my decision. However, I'm looking for a candidate who will stand up to powerful interests in the city of New York. Someone who cares about public housing. Someone who recognizes that the leadership of NYCHA has failed. Someone who recognizes that school closings have resulted in failure. And someone who recognizes that everyday New Yorkers need a voice in government. That's what I'm looking for in a mayor.
Ms. James, I know in politics it can be kind of tricky to choose who you'll be voting for, to announce it, especially among your fellow Democrats. Is that why you are choosing not to share who you've
No, I haven't really made a decision. And at some point in time, I will make a decision and we'll share it with you. But I'm really looking for a clarion call, for someone who can inspire individuals and provide hope to individuals, particularly in a city where there's growing disparity in income
inequality. But you'll share it before Election Day? Before the primary?
Maybe on Election Day. Maybe I'll wake up one day and my decision will be made. But again, it's really on the best interest, who is going to represent the best interest of everyday New Yorkers.
Ms. Guerrero, you're not a politician.
No, I'm not.
Do you want to share who you're voting for?
Sure. And you've certainly just gotten answers from politicians who don't answer, who dance and dance and dance. I think that there are several candidates for mayor that are quite good, but I'll give the same answer I've been giving for a year. I like Bill Thompson. He's a friend. He's the educator in the room. He's the adult in the room. He has been fighting for people in New York City for a long, long time, and they all know what their answer is. They're not going to tell you, but that's mine. I like Bill.
Senator Squadron?
I haven't decided, and I really want a mayor who's going to understand that with a city that's more popular than it's been in decades, the challenges of affordability, of making a life in this city have grown enormously. Someone who understands that we've made some gains, but there needs to be a real focus on making sure this continues to be a city that's a great engine of opportunity for people from around the world.
Let me jump in and ask you, have you narrowed it down? Would you be willing to share with us maybe the top two?
Look, Melissa, as you point out, we're all running for office and we're up here. And so I actually think that that gets very political because we're running for office, and so I haven't made an endorsement. That would be something that I think would be seen in the context of the election. And I am looking very closely as a citizen, as someone who was born and raised in the city and loves it, to make that decision.
Do you think anyone who's seeking elected office, particularly public advocate, should disclose who they voted for?
Only if they say they're going to.
And are you going to?
If I make an endorsement, I will be sure to invite you and all of these sponsors.
All right. We'll move on to Michael Howard Saul.
So we did a little research into your voting records, and according to the New York City Board of Election, only Councilmember James is the only person on our stage today who has voted in all city elections in 2009 and in 2005. And so we want to ask you why you didn't exercise your right to vote. We're going to start with Ms. Guerrero. You have 30 seconds each, but with Ms. Guerrero, the records show that you didn't vote once in a city election for about 12 years.
Yes.
Not in 2009, not in 2005,
Yes, correct.
not in 2001. Why is that?
The non-political answer, and thank you for letting me know about that last week in great detail. People died so that we could vote. This is an extraordinary gift, and there's no good answer to that other than it didn't happen. As you can probably guess, I get very intense and focused, and I get very focused on what I'm doing at times in life, depending on what it is. But boy, oh boy, am I going to take that focus and fight for New York City with everything I have. The focus that sort of takes things away is like a laser, and I'm going to laser for the city in about 15 days when I win this.
Well, you said in the last debate that you've been thinking about running for public advocate for 20 years.
Yes.
Do you think it's fair for voters to question the level of your civic engagement, given that you haven't voted in a single city election this century?
I think any voter who wants to question anything is fair, but there are many ways to come at service, and there are many ways to engage the citizenry, the city, the electorate. There are many ways to serve. I see servants, real servants with the heart of a servant, doing things in an extraordinary way that are outside of the voting booth, and I represent them as well, clearly in my example, but clearly also in the passion and conviction that I have attacked and attended to everything in my life. Thank you for the question.
Senator Squadron, the records show that you did not vote in the 2005 primary, and as you know, that featured a hotly contested race for the Democratic mayoral nomination. Freddie Ferrer won that. Why is that?
I'm actually surprised by that record because my recollection would be that I had, but I'll go back and check. I actually was involved in that primary election, so not as an elected official, but as someone working for one of the campaigns, so I'm surprised.
Right. Do you think it's important for elected officials and candidates to be voting in elections?
It's critically important to vote, and it's something that we don't see enough of. The Democratic primary is likely to decide many of the elections this year because of the way the city is set up, and very few people are going to participate. The more who do, the better off we are.
Ms. Serjani, the records show that you registered to vote in New York City in 2006, but your campaign tells us that you moved to New York in 2002. So that's a 4-year gap. Can you tell us why was there such a gap?
If that's true, so I need to go also check to make sure that's accurate. But I will say that, I came to New York City in search of opportunity, and I didn't know if I was going to stay. And I thought I might go back and move home to Chicago because I was helping out my parents during a tough time. And I fell in love with New York. And I chose to stay here, to get active here, to organize people here. And I decided to register to vote because I had committed myself to New York City, and I'm proud of that. Not every person who runs for office, a qualification should be that they were born and raised in New York.
That's time. I guess just one follow-up here. I know that you were very involved in the 2004 presidential race, and that you supported John Kerry. And
well, that's why I'm surprised that I was registered in 2006, and I want to check that because I recollect voting in New York.
So is it possible that you voted someplace else, even though you were living in New York?
I have to go check. I know I voted, and I thought I voted in New York. Listen, I don't think it was you, but someone said that I didn't vote in the past presidential, and we showed that I'd moved because I'd gotten and filled out an absentee ballot, and you found it. So
Council member, you heard what your opponents just said. What do you think of your opponent's voting history? I should point out to the viewers that you voted in 2001, every city election, and 2005 and 2009. I guess you're a triple prime voter. So what do you make of the voting history of your opponents here, and what impact, if any, do you think it should have on this election?
So even though I'm a triple prime voter, I haven't received any of their literature, even though they've spent millions on mailings. Listen, I worked for Fernando Ferrer in 2005. It was an honor and a privilege. And yesterday, thousands of individuals marched on the Mall in Washington. They marched on the Mall in Washington because it was the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, because he believed in democracy and because countless number of individuals wanted hope. I believe in democracy. I believe in the power of government and how it can transform lives. It transformed my life. You see, I come from humble beginnings.
All right.
That's time.
And as a result of that, that's why I vote.
Okay. Jorge Ramos from
Thank you, David. Some say the Office of Public Advocate is a taxpayer-funded stepping stone for those who someday want to run for mayor. In fact, 2 of the last 3 public advocates have done just that. Would you rule out a run for mayor, Mr. Squadron?
Look, I want to do the job of public advocate for 8 years and do my very best to answer that original question that got asked. Why does this office exist, and how is it most relevant? And I'm certainly not planning to run for mayor.
Ms. Sajani.
I have no intention to run for mayor. I want to be public advocate. You know, for some of the folks that are running for this seat, they want to get out of Albany or they think it's their time. I want to be the public advocate. I've been the deputy public advocate. I know the potential of that office. And I have been given so much as the daughter of refugees that it is my obligation to give back.
Thank you.
And we need a public advocate who is going to fight for the underserved.
Ms. James.
Unlike a lot of my opponents, I do not represent the well-heeled. I do not represent the well-connected. I'm not interested in running for mayor. I'm interested in representing the voice of everyday New Yorkers. Their voices have been lost, and it's really critically important that they have a strong public advocate. I've demonstrated that throughout my entire career.
Thank you. Ms. Guerrero?
Yes. 22 years ago, I had a professor say to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Kathy?" And I told her I wanted to run the city. And she said to me, "Good luck with that, kid. It would be nice if you actually knew something." And I focused in on the Public Advocate's Office because it is extraordinary. And it would be nice if our elected officers knew something. So the answer is, I want to be the public advocate and only the public advocate.
Now, have you thought about running for mayor? Yes or no, Mr. Squadron?
No.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Ms.
No.
James?
No.
Not now, not in the future? That's it? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jorge. We want to take a moment to remind everyone to use the hashtag NYC Debates and tweet us if there's a question that you think the candidates didn't fully answer, or if there's a new question you want to add to the mix. We're going to try and add those questions in our 30-minute web-only portion of the debate. That'll be our last 30 minutes. So at 12:30, the debate will end here on broadcast on television. We'll continue to stream live online. So get to tweeting. Now, we turn it over to Melissa.
All right, so now we're going to turn to a series of questions that are designed for specific issues and individual candidates. And Senator Squadron, we're going to begin with you. During the past year, while you've been working in Albany, there have been numerous calls for Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver to step down as Speaker after admittedly mishandling a number of sexual harassment complaints. Can you explain to us why you've been largely silent on the subject of Mr. Silver's future?
Well, look, I've been very clear that the way those complaints were handled was absolutely unacceptable. I have hailed the investigations into those complaints. And look, at the end of the day, the Democratic members of the State Assembly are the ones who choose the Speaker, and I've left it to them.
But since you claim, as you run for public advocate, to be a champion of ethics reform, you're promising in this job to stand up for people who don't have a voice, to stand up for victims, and also to ensure that government is acting appropriately, which it clearly did not in Albany. You come from Albany, you had a stake in Albany over the last year. This seems like an issue where maybe you might want to take a tougher stand.
Well, I come from New York City, from Brooklyn, where my wife and I are raising our son, in the Bronx, where I was raised. And I have passed ethics reform legislation in Albany successfully, as the New York Times mentioned in their endorsement of me yesterday. I've been very clear after investigations that a number of the folks in Albany whose behavior is absolutely deplorable and offensive should resign.
But not clear on the future of Sheldon Silver. Do you want to take a position at this time?
I've taken a position.
Which is that you're not going to say you think
Which is that
he should
serious
stay?
mistakes were made. I welcome the investigations, and it's up to the members of that body to choose who their Speaker is.
Okay, let's open this up to everyone else. Should Sheldon Silver step down as Speaker? Ms. Saujani, 10 seconds.
Possibly, yes. It's not just about Shelley Silver. It's about Micah Kellner, someone who's also been supporting Daniel. You know, we have made it seem as though sexual harassment is okay, and that as a woman and as someone who's encouraging more women to run, it is
We've got to
wrong.
move on. We were looking for a yes or no. We have a maybe. Ms. James?
Yeah, it's about a culture of corruption which exists not only in Albany, but in City Hall as well as on Wall Street.
Yes
and the
or
answer
no?
is yes, he should step down.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yes, it's time.
All right, just before I turn over to Michael, reminder, these issue-focused questions, we're going to give you 60 seconds. We'll see if there's a need for rebuttals. Just, I wanted to remind you that. Michael.
My question is for Ms. Guerrero.
Yes, sir.
You come from a family of teachers and firefighters, and you have said many, many times on the campaign trail that you are determined to protect unions. So I'm curious as to what you make of folks who believe that pension costs have gotten out of control, with roughly $1 out of every $6 that's coming from the taxpayers going to pay pensions. As this issue gets debated on the public stage, are you going to be more in the corner of union members, or are you going to be more in the corner of taxpayers?
Yes. So to New York City, to the 47 unions that have endorsed me, the PBA, the 20 law enforcement agencies, the firemen, the EMS, the EMT, Amalgamated Transit, the bus drivers, the communication workers, all the longshoremen, trades and trades that keep coming, the trade unions, I stand for what they stand for. I believe that their pensions need to be held harmless, that their contracts need to be held harmless. My father worked 2 full-time union jobs. He was a teacher. He changed his clothes, worked the 4 to 12 shift as a longshoreman. This is what I say to New Yorkers. My father purchased into those contracts. He deferred compensation. Keep your hands out of my daddy's pockets. And the very specific answer to your question is we have to take care of them. These are not gifts. This is what they have earned. And if we can't pay for it immediately, and I get it, I'm not a fool, the money's all not there, I am sure that there isn't a single member of the rank and file who wouldn't take their money in a lag time.
So you are firmly in the union's corner?
I am firmly in their corner. Somebody needs to be. The union conversation in the United States is going to be trained on New York City in January, and we need to not equivocate on this conversation.
So we'd like to open up this important question to everybody. The question for the rest of you is, should retroactive raises be given to city employees as the new mayor hammers out contracts with city unions in the coming year? Do you believe that retroactive raises is appropriate? We'll begin with you, Senator Squadron.
30 seconds responses. 30 seconds.
Look, first of all, let's be clear. We're running for public advocate, and it's the mayor's responsibility to close contracts that are fair to workers, fair to those who are members of labor unions, and also responsible for the city. There are people in this city who work for the city who make $30,000 or less a year and haven't had raises for years and years. That's a real problem. They must be respected. That must be dealt with. But, you know, at a cost of estimated close to $8 billion, I don't know how you can afford the whole thing.
So you support retroactive raises or not?
I support them being on the table, but I don't know how you can afford the whole thing.
So, Johnny?
I support them being on the table, and we have to find the money to pay for them. It is incumbent on the public advocate to stand up for the middle class unequivocally, and that is what I have done. And I know in government, when we want to find the money, we find it, and we should find it, because this would never be acceptable in the private sector. If you've done your job correctly and you don't get a raise, that's unacceptable in the private sector, and it should be unacceptable in the public sector, period.
Council member?
I support retroactive raises. That's why I called for a lockbox for funds. I've been endorsed by the Working Families Party and countless number of labor organizations in the city of New York standing up on behalf of working people. It's unconscionable that they do not have a contract, that not one municipal contract in the city of New York has been negotiated by this mayor. I uncovered the biggest scam in the city of New York, a private contract by this administration. There is a lot of waste and fraud in this government, and you need a public advocate who will investigate that, and I will do that.
And Ms. Guerrero, just on retroactive raises, you are where?
You bet. They need every single penny. They earned it. It's theirs. Give it to them.
Jorge Ramos.
Thanks, David. Reshma Saujani, when you ran for Congress 3 years ago, you said you were running on your Wall Street record, not from it. But during this campaign, there has been little mention of your career on Wall Street, including in your own campaign bio. Are you purposely distancing yourself from Wall Street's unpopularity on Main Street? 60 seconds.
Absolutely not. I am not running away from my record on Wall Street. There are hundreds of articles that discuss the time that I spent there. In fact, I released 10 years of my taxes that tell you where I worked, how long I worked there, and how much money I made. Look, the reality is I don't have a trust fund. And when I graduated law school, I was hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And I worked in the private sector. But while I was working in the private sector as a lawyer, not as a banker, I didn't invest in stocks, I was helping people with asylum cases, helping people in deportation cases, helping President Obama get elected. I am proud of that. The thing is that when we run for office, we don't have a right to privacy anymore. But do you think that it is easy for me at 37 years old to admit that I still have student loans to pay, to admit that I'm sending home money to my father? Do you think it's easy for him, as he's done everything to get into the middle class? That's shameful for him.
But then
we have an obligation to put up our record, and I've done that, and the others have not.
But then on your campaign bio, that information was removed.
Look, I spent 3 years working.
Why was it removed?
It was not removed. It was not removed on my campaign bio. It is everywhere when we talk about it. It is on hundreds of websites. And when I go out and I talk about
the last 2 jobs, Ms. Sojani, that you held on Wall Street, those do not appear in your campaign.
Well, I've had a job since my first job was at Baskin Robbins. That doesn't appear on my website either. I've been working since I was 12 years old. I mean, my career has been long.
But
I spent 3 years
it's your
working.
more recent experience. It's
Well,
what
I mean,
you were
I've
doing
spent the
just
past
before you left
the
to
past
join-
4
to
years
enter
of my
politics.
life in public service, in creating Girls Who Code, in being the deputy public advocate. I think that my experience in the private sector, working in a financial services firm, is important to this job. The public advocate sits on the pension board. I'm going to protect your pension assets. The very firms that I worked at are the very ones that are investing our city's union money.
Do any of you believe that Ms. Sojani's Wall Street credentials is a problem? Councilmember?
I think it should be taken into consideration. She's worked for a who's who of bad actors on Wall Street, and I think that should be taken into consideration. I mean, obviously, the question is, who will you represent? When she ran against Congresswoman Maloney, someone who has stood up on behalf of women all throughout her congressional career, she indicated that she was defending Wall Street. And obviously, working people in the city of New York who are losing their homes as a result of the foreclosure crisis, obviously should be concerned about someone who once represented and defended Wall Street.
Ms. Sojani,
It's ridiculous to even say that. You know, I did not foreclose on anyone's homes, and I'm proud to have run in a Democratic primary against a woman. That is backward thinking, to think that women should not be running against each other. And Councilwoman James ran against the brother of the dead councilman, but that's okay. And it shouldn't. We're in a Democratic primary. People should feel free to run. We need as many voices in the process, but there shouldn't be a different rule for Tish James than there is for other folks.
Do you want to respond to that allegation about James Davis's brother?
I was a reluctant candidate in the aftermath of the assassination of James Davis. In fact, I was petitioned by my constituents to run.
That's not what they say.
Well, they tell me there's a petition. They went to all throughout the city of New York, and they urged me to run. And in fact, they contacted the Working Families Party and urged me to run for city council.
And I was petitioned by young women and South Asians because I was the first South Asian to run. But I think that it doesn't matter. It's important for us to run. It's a good thing. It's not something that we should resist. That is backwards feminism in the sense of like saying that women shouldn't run against women. We should be competing against each other. That's important.
All right, I'm going to give you 15 seconds on that, Ms. James, and then we'll move on.
Just listen, in terms of backwards feminism, I wouldn't have a problem if you would have run against a man. But to run against Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, someone who has stood up on behalf of women's rights and reproductive services in this country, someone who has been a leader, I believe.
So a woman should never run against another woman. That is two Democratic women that are progressive, pro-choice women should never run against each other.
Reshma, you took on
We're running against each other.
Reshma, you took on Congresswoman Maloney, and then
we need just very quickly on Congresswoman Maloney. I mean, you said some very negative things about the Congresswoman during that race. Do you regret any of that?
I regret the tenor of the race, but I got into that race when Congresswoman Maloney was running against Kirsten Gillibrand. I thought it was an open seat, and I was the first South Asian woman to run. And a lot of people in my community felt that it was important, and I'm proud of that race.
All right.
But yes, do I regret the tenor of the race? Absolutely.
Okay.
But I do not regret running.
We're going to move on. Okay, next question for Councilwoman James.
Yes.
Councilwoman James.
I'd like to actually answer the question as asked about whether or not, I think your question was, does anyone else think that it's a problem?
Well, you're right. In fairness, I'll give you just a few seconds.
Thank you. So the answer is, I don't think that having worked on Wall Street is a problem because there are good, hardworking people who work there, and they need to be respected as well. What I have a problem with is people dancing, whomever they are, about whom they are, and being authentic or inauthentic. And that's really what the story is here. Don't lie, whomever you are, about whatever you have done and why and how you have done it. And there are several people on this stage who don't even really know who they are.
All right. Senator Squadron.
Of course, our background, who we are, what we bring to the job, what we've done, and our vision for the job are all relevant factors. You know, I talk a lot about the fact that I was elected in a campaign for change against a longtime incumbent. Talk a lot about the things that I was able to get done in a very, very difficult environment. So absolutely, it's appropriate to look at everything we bring to the table.
All right, I give you 10 seconds.
Sorry,
You have to move
I think Kathy's point is clear. And she hasn't been authentic about her positions on choice, about who she is. And that's right. Voters do have a right to know what Kathy's position is on reproductive rights and choice, as well as her ethnicity, who she is, what she's about.
Okay.
I've always been honest about that.
Sure. So this is who I am. My name is Kathy Guerrero. I am going to be your next public advocate. I'm Italian and German. I'm a Catholic and a Christian. I believe in the rule of law. I believe that Roe v. Wade
all right,
is that.
you'll have topic. Thank you. We
got
may
it.
be able to revisit this in
I'm
our
sure.
third half hour as well. But I do want to get a question into Councilmember James, an issue-focused question, something that's come up along the campaign trail. You failed to disclose rental income you collected on your house, which was required by law.
Yes.
The last debate, you failed to answer a question about whether you took donations from developers while you were deciding on their projects as an influential councilwoman. And as you know, the Wall Street Journal recently reported you perhaps shaved a few years off your age. So the broader question is, should there be concern, or should New Yorkers be concerned that they're not getting full disclosure from you?
So in regards to the disclosure form, I was originally informed that one did not have to report rental income. As soon as I was advised otherwise, I amended all of the disclosure forms and in fact have made them public. 2, in regards to the question with regards to accepting contributions, let me tell you about the project in question. The project in question I originally supported and then opposed it. I opposed it midstream. 1, because it was tied to the demolition of a historic library in Brooklyn Heights. And I opposed that demolition. It was a library that is historic and is often patronized by Girl Scouts. I decided once we saved the library and once we were able to get more affordable housing in that project to support that project. The developers in question, in fact, withdrew support for the candidacy of Letitia James, and the only thing that I got in return was Girl Scout cookies.
Well, you know, critics contend that you were trying to hold out for labor union support because ultimately the projects that went forward were not dramatically different.
Right.
Your response to that?
The response to that is that the second phase of the project will be built with union labor. And in addition to that, in the footprint of the project, I fought for more affordable housing. We were successful. In regards to shaving off some years in my age, I don't think you would ask that question of a man.
All right. We're going to move on now to a lightning round.
All right, we'll go to the lightning round. I'm going to ask a series of questions of all of you. You'll each have 15 seconds to answer, and we'll go down the line, starting with Ms. James.
Yes.
Does the NYPD need a federal monitor?
Yes.
Ms. Guerrero?
No.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And we should point out you get 15 seconds, so you can use it or not.
I'll take that 15 seconds, and I'd like to say...
Well, now it's 10. Go.
All right. There they go again. These three continue to think that it's about them. It's about you, New York. It's not about them and their small ball political back and forth. It's about you. I know that I've been fighting for Staten Island to get rid of those crazy
I think
tolls.
that was 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll keep going.
I'd like to take my 10 seconds on that. I, as a woman of color, am offended by the fact that every indication and evidence shows that stop and frisk has been implemented is racist and wrong. And we do need a federal monitor. And anybody who is going to stand up and be the next public advocate for a city of young kids, Black, Latino, and Asian, that are getting stopped every single day needs an advocate who's going to be strong for them.
10 seconds.
12. Look, stop and frisk as currently practiced is absolutely unacceptable. I carry the bill that would deal with one component of it, which is the inequitable marijuana laws in our state, which mean that you're 9 to 10 times more likely to get a criminal record for carrying a small amount of marijuana if you're Black or Latino than if you're white in Brooklyn or Manhattan. That's not okay either.
And Ms. James?
Sure. Racial profiling has no place in a civil society. I was proud to sign on to the lawsuit, and now as a result we have a federal monitor as well as the challenge on public housing in the city of New York, and I will continue to do that as the next public advocate defending the Constitution for all New Yorkers.
All right. Mayoral candidate John Liu supports legalizing marijuana. Do you support it? Ms. Guerrero, 15 seconds.
Look, I talked about the decriminalization bill for carrying small amounts of marijuana in plain view, which I, in fact, carry. I support medical marijuana as well.
Yes, I support it.
Medical marijuana and the decriminalizing of smaller units, smaller amounts of marijuana.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say about that? Would you, in fact, carry?
I, in fact, do carry a bill that would make it no longer
Thank you for clarifying.
marijuana
You carry
in
the
Plainview.
bill.
Not
We
just do I
wanted to make sure
support
you
it, I carry it. I've been one of the lead
Saying that you
advocates
carry the
for it.
marijuana.
Did you think he was carrying marijuana?
Yeah, like, I have some right now.
Just making sure we're
Let me be clear. I'm going to use one of my 15
Yes
seconds.
or no
No.
answers.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
There's been talk of expanding access to Plan B in city schools. Do you
Yes.
support giving the morning after pill to middle schoolers? We begin with Mr. Squadron.
Yes.
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 No, this is about parental rights. I do not want anybody to give my child a Tylenol, let alone anything else, that without my express consent. Parents have been removed from the business of their own children in the classroom and in schools. I've had enough, and no, there isn't a parent in New York City who would want you to give their child
Okay, time's
anything
up.
without their consent.
All right. Do you say yes or no to government-issued ID cards for undocumented immigrants? Ms. James?
Yes.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yes.
Senator?
Yes, and they have to be done in a way that doesn't create any additional marginalization of this community. And one of the things I would do as public advocate is partner with day laborers, many of whom are undocumented workers and none of whom get the kind of worker protections they need.
Reshma
Yes,
Saujani?
I mean, I have been the person on this stage that is fighting strongly for immigrants when it comes to building the Dream Fellowship. When it comes to saying, as public advocate, I'm going to make sure that our immigrants have representation. They are taken advantage of by lawyers every single day. These immigrants, these undocumented immigrants, they pay taxes, and they have a right to work and to be able to drive and to be able to have a government-issued ID.
I think I'm the only candidate here who has buried more day laborers in the city of New York, individuals who have died in construction sites that were unsafe. And two, I've been organizing low-wage workers in fast food restaurants and will continue to do that as the next public advocate of the city of New York.
All right, moving forward, let's try to use the 15 seconds all at once so we don't keep coming back around and around. Should casino gambling be legalized in New York City? Ms. Saujani?
Yes.
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 All right, that was easy.
Coney
Will
Island.
will you support Elliot Spitzer if he becomes the nominee for controller? Ms. Guerrero?
Yes.
If he becomes the Democratic nominee, well, I've supported Scott Stringer in the Democratic primary, and I think it's critical that we have Democrats up and down the line in the new administration, so yes.
All right. 15 seconds.
I am also supporting Scott Stringer and have said that I am not voting for Elliot Spitzer, but if he is our Democratic nominee, I will support him.
And you'll vote for him?
And I will vote for him.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Sexting has headlined much of the campaign season, probably to the chagrin of public advocate candidates who are vying for attention in this race. Have you ever? Senator Squadron.
No, I haven't. But I also do think that this is an example of the fact that a lot of these personal stories have overwhelmed a lot of what's really important here. You know, the public advocate, as we heard about at the beginning of this debate, has an enormous role to play for those New Yorkers who have no one fighting for them. And so, you know, if any of my opponents don't want to answer that question, I certainly am respectful of their privacy.
No, I have not. And I have built a coalition called Up to Us, which I've asked my opponents to join to say, let's talk about substance over scandal. Most parents don't want to send their daughters to Albany. And I disagree with Daniel. I think your private life matters. I think what you do in your private life matters. When you choose to be a public servant, you don't have any privacy anymore. And especially in this time of sex and scandal, we need to hold our elected officials accountable.
Councilmember James?
No, I've never sexted. And let me go on to say that, unfortunately, it has been a distraction. We've not been in a position to talk about issues that most New Yorkers care about. The growing income inequality in our city of New York. Tonight, that 52,000 individuals are going to sleep in our shelters homeless. Most of them are children. The fact that a significant number of individuals are being priced out of the city of New York. We need a public advocate who can stand up against special interests on behalf of working people.
Ms. Guerrero.
I have never sexted, and I would like to talk. It's very funny. Instead, why don't we just talk about some issues? Talk about transportation in the Rockaways. Talk about ticket blitzes in Bay Ridge. Talk about those crazy tolls on Staten Island. Talk about schools in East New York. Talk about the waste transfer station, of which I am the only one on this dais who opposes it. Why don't we talk about the stuff that New York City candidates really care about? That's just me.
Which New York politician do you most emulate? Ms. Saujani?
Do I most emulate?
Currently?
Admire, emulate?
Current or Hillary? I mean, I admire Hillary Clinton the most.
Living or dead?
Your choice.
Either.
Your choice.
Oh, obviously, I emulate Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, standing up on behalf of New Yorkers in the city of New York, a loud voice, a passionate voice, someone who made change and made history in the city of New York and this country.
Ms. Guerrero?
Mayor LaGuardia, unbiased, unbought, real, authentic, populist, no joke.
Senator?
Look, Senator Chuck Schumer, who has taught me so much about how to really represent folks on what they most need. And I'm really proud to have his support in this race, really proud of the fact that I've been able to partner with him on so much. You know, I would say he was only briefly a New York politician, but Robert Kennedy's focus on poverty and issues that have been left behind has to be mentioned.
All right.
Can I use my 3 seconds for saying why Hillary? The reason why I said Hillary Clinton is we are running a campaign that's about women and girls. And I am really proud as a female candidate to say that we have to put women and girls who are breadwinners first.
Sorry about that. Last question. We'll begin with Ms. James.
Yes.
Is New York better off now than it was 12 years ago? Quickly.
We obviously have some challenges in the city of New York. Again, growing income inequality, wage stagnation in the city of New York, 52,000 individuals.
Yes or no? Better off?
I think the grade on the mayor of the city of New York is a C.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yes, I think we're better off. I think that the streets are safer. I certainly do also have problems with things like that.
Senator Squadron, yes or no? We're running out of time. Yes or no?
Better off than 12 years ago, but huge risks for the next 10.
All right, Senator,
Ms.
thank you.
Sarjani?
Not for the 3.6 million people that are living in poverty.
All right, thank you. We just want to match our time constraints for broadcast. That was the last question for the televised broadcast. The debate, though, not over. Much more coming up online on NBCNewYork.com, WSJ.com, and TelemundoNY.com. We'll be giving the candidates time to ask each other one question.
And before we turn to our special webcast, though, a few notes for voters. We want to show you a mobile site that is one-stop shopping for anything you want to know for Election Day. The Campaign Finance Board created nycvotes.org to make sure that New Yorkers have everything they need to be informed voters. You can learn more about the candidates and connect with them through social media before primary day. You can find your polling site, see sample ballots, or make a contribution. Again, the mobile site is at nycvotes.org. And the city's official debate series continues on Wednesday night with the Republican mayoral debate. And the next News 4 Telemundo Nueva York Wall Street Journal debates are coming up on September 3rd and September 8th. We'll be hosting the Democratic candidates at 7 p.m. on the 3rd. And the Republican candidates in the mayor's race will join us 11:30 a.m. on the 8th. Both debates will air live.
On behalf of News 4 New York, Telemundo Nueva York, and the Wall Street Journal, we thank you for watching the Public Advocate primary debate. We hope you now have what you need to make an informed decision on primary day. Again, that is September 10th. Now, for those online, the webcast is going to begin in just a few moments. We've got more fun and action planned for you, so join us there. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
From News 4 New York, this is a special presentation, Decision 2013, the New York City Public Advocate Debate, jointly sponsored by NBC4 New York, Telemundo Nueva York, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York City Campaign Finance Board.
And so the next 30 minutes, we're going to dig deeper into the issues. We're going to ask some of your questions. We're also going to give the candidates time to ask each other questions. We want to remind all of you to join the debate on Twitter using the hashtag NYC Debates.
And we're going to start with the candidates. Each of you will have 15 seconds to ask a question of one of your opponents. The responses will be limited to 60 seconds. And Ms. Guerrero, we will begin with you.
Yes. I grew up in Brooklyn and Staten Island, and I know very personally what happens when a garbage dump and garbage is put in residential neighborhoods, when cancer-causing agents affect people's lives. And my question, and since I am the only candidate on this dais who has actually signed the pledge to protect the Upper East Side waste transfer station against that waste transfer station, my question would be to Senator Squadron. Why do you want that waste transfer station on the Upper East Side in the middle of a residential neighborhood with children and parks and families?
Right. Well, of course, the basis of the question isn't true. None of us want waste transfer stations anywhere. There was a citywide plan to vastly improve how we deal with solid waste in this city. And I didn't
Why won't you sign on to the pledge to protect then? I mean, it just makes sense to me.
I didn't have a vote on that plan, but I want to be clear. If I had, as Councilmember James did, I would have voted in support of it, and it does include that waste transfer station. And you need to be supportive of the entire plan, which I would be, including that.
I wouldn't be. I have problems with putting garbage in residential neighborhoods where children and parks and families live and breathe and attempt to live their lives every day.
All right. Senator Squadron. your turn.
Thank you. Councilmember James, at our last televised debate, I asked you about the People's Pledge signed by Elizabeth Warren to keep independent expenditures out of the election, including an enforcement mechanism, particularly important because of New York City's great campaign finance system, and whether you would sign the pledge as I have and Ms. Sajani has. Would you be willing to sign such a pledge? And in the same debate, Ms. Sajani asked you about...
Wrap up the
15
question.
seconds.
would you be interested in answering either of the questions asked of you in the last debate?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So let me inform the public and as well as you. Citizens United. Citizens United was a decision in the United States Supreme Court. It involved Senator Hillary Clinton. And basically the decision, the Supreme Court decided that corporations should be treated like individuals for purposes of campaign financing. And corporations can now make contributions. And so clearly, if in fact I was accepting donations from corporations and was accepting donations from corporations, I would oppose that. I oppose Citizens United. In fact, I attended a press conference and issued a statement in regards to Citizens United and working with the current public advocate, Bill de Blasio, to overturn Citizens United. But this is not Citizens United. You see, this is a political gimmick because you want me to sign a pledge knowing that I've received the lion's share of unions in the city of New York. You want to silence the voice of New Yorkers in the city of New York. I will not sign on to the pledge because I believe that New Yorkers and working people in the city of New York through their labor unions should be heard.
If I could just respond briefly.
Okay.
I think we're out of time.
15 second response.
Look, I alone in this race don't take contributions from political action committees, LLCs, partnerships. I never have. And we have a great campaign finance system in New York City that empowers individuals. The more, the better. The independent expenditures undermine that. And this is not about corporate contributions, the pledge. It's about independent expenditures.
Sorry, Senator. Ms. Sajani, your turn.
Sure. I've asked you in the last debate whether you ever took a campaign contribution.
Who
are you asking?
Sorry, Councilwoman James.
Okay, thank you.
I asked you in the last debate whether you've ever taken a campaign contribution from a developer, their spouse, or someone affiliated with them at the same time that you were deciding on a project, and you did not respond. In this past couple of weeks, as discussed today, you failed to report income from your apartment, from your apartment building that you own.
Wrap up for the question, please.
Sorry, and you've also failed to disclose your taxes. So I'm going to ask you again. Do you believe in transparency, and what else are you hiding?
So I believe in transparency in government, and obviously, Reshma, I'll release my taxes. That's really not the issue. And the bottom line is, I don't live in an apartment building. I don't own an apartment building. I live in a brownstone with a tenant or two. And the fact is that I amended all of my disclosure forms, and they're obviously subject to public review, and in fact, you have already reviewed them. I was advised not to disclose the rental income because it was not a business, and then when I received the proper advice, I amended all of them. And the reality is, in regards to development in the city of New York, 80% of your donors come from Wall Street. In the development that I opposed in the city of New York, I was able to stop that development, get more affordable housing in the city of New York, make sure that workers were being paid prevailing wages, and ensure that a historic library in Park Slope and Brooklyn Heights was preserved here in the city of New York. And again, the only thing that I received in return was some chocolate mints.
Councilmember James,
sorry I didn't share them with you.
In fairness, I've heard you ask this question several times, but I haven't heard a specific answer.
Yeah.
Did you accept contributions from developers at a time when you were considering their projects or their spouse? That was just a yes or no question.
No.
First of all, Tish James, what you said about me having 80% of my contributions from Wall Street is just a lie. And it's, again, another example of you categorically being not forthcoming. The reality is you've received hundreds of thousands of dollars from real estate developers. I've received barely any. I have the most amount of donors, who have given the lowest amount of contributors, and they're folks from the South Asian community, women, students, people in the technology company that are excited about the work that I'm doing in Girls Who Code. Because the public advocate sits on the city's pension board, there are pay-to-play rules. Wall Street can barely participate in any of our elections. For you to continually say that, you're just deceiving the voters, and it's wrong. And the reality is you have taken contributions from Two Trees while you were opining on a project.
Ms. James, your turn to ask a question.
Again, to my opponent, you have worked for...
Which opponent?
Reshma. You have worked for the...
I should have known after that. You should know by now.
You have worked for the who's who of bad actors on Wall Street. And again, I'm not going to take any ethics lessons from a Wall Street attorney. Every single individual, 80% of the individuals who have contributed to your campaign, you can see where they work. They work on Wall Street. They work in the financial industry. They do not represent the vast majority of working people in the city of New York. New Yorkers need a public advocate because they're a strong public advocate, an independent public advocate, because they're concerned that their voices are being drowned out and being hijacked by special interests, the same special interests that you represent.
I think that's a question that I can try to respond. Again, I'm sure Michael Saul will write an article tomorrow about the fact that 80% of my donors are not from Wall Street. But the reality is yes, I worked on Wall Street as an attorney, and there are bad actors there, and they should be in jail. But to say that that disqualifies me from public service is to say because you work in the city council with Dan Halloran, who committed fraud, you're disqualified. That because Daniel Squadron works in Albany with Vito Lopez, and who's been charged with sexual harassment, that he's disqualified. Every single person who's watching this television has worked probably at a company or a place that has some bad people in it.
Okay.
That doesn't disqualify them from a job. That
That's the
shouldn't
allotted
disqualify
time,
them
Ms.
from
Sudgett.
public
Can I
service. And the firm that I worked with.
Johnny, that's the allotted time to
Sure.
respond.
May I just
we'll
say,
give you just
it
10,
does,
15 seconds.
Sure, it doesn't disqualify you, Mr. Johnny. People should just take it into consideration. They should consider your whole record, your past history, and the fact that I have had a record of accomplishment working for the public service all of my career because I recognize the value of government.
I was actually mentioned there briefly.
I would like to say something.
All right. You mentioned 50 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Hypothetical, yeah.
Thank you very much. Look, I have fought for and passed ethics reform legislation in Albany. I have stood up clearly against some of the worst actors, including Vito Lopez and others, as an independent voice. And being in public service and standing up against the worst in public service is something I'm very proud of.
But you haven't stood up against
I would like to say something. There they go again. These three fighting in and amongst themselves like cats in a box. While they fight among each other on small ball political stuff, New York City, I fight for you.
All right. Michael Howard Saul.
Sure. Before I ask my question, I actually wanted to go back to something in the first hour. We heard about abortion rights very briefly. So, Ms. Guerrero,
Yes.
do you believe that Roe v. Wade should be the law of the land?
Absolutely. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. And anyone who stands before you here or in any city or space in the United States should accept that law and understand that every New Yorker should have the full blanket of protection and the widest berth of that protection. I believe it, I know it, and I will fight for it.
But it's
Thank
one
you for
thing
the
to say
question.
the law of the land should be followed. It's another thing to say that you believe it should be the law of the land. It should be.
I do believe that it is the law of the land. I appreciate the opportunity to say it to the camera. New York, I believe it.
I know that Planned Parenthood had sent you a questionnaire, and I think they were concerned that you didn't respond to it.
Right.
What's your response to not responding?
Yes, they and dozens of other questionnaires. It's questionnaire city out there. I have a list of dozens that we haven't done. We do what we can, and we move on. That had nothing to do with other than they and about 19 others didn't get answered, but thank you for the question.
Ms. Guerrero, do you have a more nuanced position on abortion rights? Because
None.
you have been attacked here this morning.
Of course. And you know what? The attacks, again, like I say, they can continue to attack me and make it about me. I get it. They're pounding. They're trying to move their numbers up in the polls to catch me. But in 15 days and counting, I fight not for these small issues that they talk about. I fight for the Rockaways to get better transportation. I fight for Staten Island on those crazy tolls. I fight for Bay Ridge on the ticket.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
I
Guerrero.
fight for the Upper East Side on that waste
We're gonna move on to a different
transportation.
topic now, Michael.
Take it away.
You got it.
Moving on to the question that I am going to ask.
Gotcha.
We received a few questions via email about the state of New York City public schools.
Yeah.
So New Yorkers want to know what you are going to do to improve education in New York and how are you actually going to get results. We are going to start with Senator Squadron. 60 seconds.
And I thank everyone who emailed about that issue. Look, education in New York City is one of the key drivers as to who we are as a city. I'm really proud that I've worked with parents in my district to create a new middle school, to create a more family-friendly admissions process in kindergarten. Look, the truth is there are huge issues in education. Public Advocate will not be able to solve all of them. This is an issue that, rightly, everyone focuses on. But there are parts of the education system that are absolutely left out and ignored. As Public Advocate, I would continue the work that Bill de Blasio has been doing, making sure that the transition and how we educate kids with special needs is done in the correct way. I would take on school discipline because too often there's a path from schools to jails. I would partner with parents and community education councils to give them a stronger voice in the process in schools because they just don't have a sufficient process today. You know, each one of these three issues are overlooked and left out. None have a partner in elected office, and that's where the Public Advocate comes in and actually could, to answer the question,
Time.
make a real difference.
You know, as the founder of Girls Who Code, I've already been doing innovative work in education. You know, we have 1.4 million jobs that are going to be open in the computing-related fields. New York City is becoming the technology hub. You can make $83,000 a year as a website programmer, but we are not preparing our kids for these jobs. My program, Girls Who Code, is teaching young girls how to build websites, how to build mobile apps. Within 8 weeks, I took girls who didn't even know how to use a mouse to the point where Google and Gilt Group are fighting for them to hire them. As the next public advocate, I have committed to get computer science education in every single public school. I have helped draft legislation with Assemblyman Hevesi to have computer science fulfill as a science requirement. I am working with the United Federation of Teachers to start a program called Teachers Who Code to start training teachers. I have committed to getting technology companies to adopt schools in communities like Southeast Queens and Parkchester, where our underserved kids are desperately needing an opportunity to get into the middle class. The public advocate can play a huge role in these issues, the right one.
Councilmember? Sure. The first order of business as the next public advocate of the City of New York is to respect teachers and respect teachers in the City of New York as well as principals. I would work, obviously, with the next mayor of the City of New York to close the achievement gap for children of color and for their counterparts. I would work on making sure that arts and music are in our classroom. And as a member of the City Council, I have fought the closure of schools all throughout the City of New York, and most recently fought the administration who would want to eliminate librarians from schools in the City of New York. And as the next public advocate of the City of New York, I want to empower parents and involve them in the education of their students in the City of New York, which is why so many New Yorkers from the Bronx to Queens to Brooklyn, et cetera, have reached out to me in regards to my platform with regards to in respect to education. Unfortunately, the recent test scores indicate that we are failing, and clearly we need to move the City of New York in a different direction, and I will do that as the next public advocate working with the mayor.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yeah, you got to ask an educator this to actually get a real answer. And as the lone educator in the race, as the daughter of 2 New York City public school teachers with 100 years of public school teachers in the house that I grew up in with a doctorate and teaching at Columbia and NYU in this area, I know this. And as somebody's mother. Mayoral control of the New York City public schools has been an abject failure on the backs of its children. Every single stakeholder has been removed from the story. Parents have nothing to say. Teachers, principals, community activists. As a parent, I know more about what my kid needs in the classroom than anyone else. I also know that the charter school conversation has run amok. Co-locations are a disaster. The lack of transparency is unreal. Those test scores show what we all knew. Children of color, poor children are being failed and on levels that are outrageous. I have had enough. I would like to put the stakeholders back in the game. The New York City mayoral control of these schools must be overturned, and please, New York, stop making the teachers the bad guys. They are extraordinary.
That's time. And as one quick follow-up, should elected officials send their kids to public schools? Yes, no. Ms. Sojani?
Yes.
Yes, and may I add that I did not have an opportunity to ask a question of any of my opponents.
No, you asked one of me.
No, we went back and forth.
Ms. Guerrero?
Absolutely.
I'm planning to send my 2-year-old son to public school. My wife and I are planning to be correct.
Okay, no, I just want to clarify. You asked Ms. Seljani about the last...
It was in response to her point. I think you gave me time to respond.
Did she ask you a question?
I thought she asked me a question about Wall Street.
She did.
I think I responded to her comments.
80%.
I don't think I asked her a question at all.
I thought she
All
asked
right,
a question. I took it as I answered it as a question.
Sorry, we counted that as your question.
No, that was okay.
All right. Jorge?
Yes. Okay. One big community complaint is New York's dwindling hospitals. Since 2019, hospitals have closed. That means longer wait times and fewer doctors and nurses. What will you do to address the city's hospital emergency? Ms. James, 60 seconds.
So I've been working with the current the current public advocate, Bill de Blasio. We recently filed litigation against Long Island College Hospital to keep it open. Currently, there's a court order to keep Long Island College Hospital open. We'll be announcing some major news with regards to Interfaith tomorrow. The current public advocate and I have been working with individuals in the Bronx in regards to the closing of the labor and delivery unit in the Bronx, and as well as working with residents in the Rockaways, saving the only hospital in the Rockaways, St. John's. And clearly, I will continue that as the next public advocate, ensuring that there is health care for New Yorkers all throughout the city of New York. What we need in this city are hospitals and not more condos. What we need are not more luxury housing. The question that I would have asked my opponent, Dan Squadron, is why did he support luxury housing in a public park in his district when in fact he had the opportunity to veto it? What we need is more affordable housing for New Yorkers in the city of New York, New Yorkers who are being priced out of the city.
You should give Mr. Squadron 15 seconds to respond to that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. What I did, and I talked about this, is I helped move Brooklyn Bridge Park forward while reducing and delaying the housing. $65 million more for that park, a swimming pool that's now open, other amenities. In fact, in the New York Times endorsement of me yesterday, they pointed to the work that I had done to help move Brooklyn Bridge Park forward. I'm in favor of that, and I would ask, would it have been better to have no park at all?
Thank you, Senator Squadron. Ms. Guerrero, what would you do to address the city's emergency?
This is one of those questions where you have to understand the construct of the job and its parameters, and this is the place where the bully pulpit of the public advocate can work with the mayor to do what is probably going to be job 1, 2, or 3, which is come up with a short-term and a long-term plan for hospital facilities, healthcare plan in New York City. I have fought in the Rockaways for that hospital. I am completely upset at the loss of the hospitals on Staten Island. I personally am upset at the loss of St. Vincent's as a Manhattanite, where I birthed my daughter. This has to stop. The public advocate can, more than anything, use their personal bully pulpit and my think tank to make sure that there's data around this conversation, to make sure that the next mayor puts this at the top of his agenda, or her.
Senator Squadron, 60 seconds.
Look, we have a crisis because hospitals are closing around the city, in Brooklyn and elsewhere, and we don't have anything to replace them. We are cutting health care at a time we need more without finding more health care. You know, Long Island College Hospital's in my district, and I've been fighting to keep that hospital open since I was elected. And you know what? 6 months ago, 8 months ago, the community, everyone was told it was impossible to keep it open. The work that we've done with the great workers at Long Island College Hospital, with great community members, with partners like the Public Advocate, is we have kept Long Island College Hospital open when people said it was impossible, the kind of fight you should give up on. You know, as Public Advocate, those are exactly the kind of fights that makes the job so essential. We can't have hospital closures that get replaced with $500 million real estate deals, which is the proposal at Litch. That's insane. What we need to have is real community voice, and we need to have a public advocate who's going to take on those healthcare issues that aren't otherwise getting taken on.
If I could just jump in for half a second. Ms. Guerrero, you mentioned several times, actually at the top of the debate, that you're a mother. Do you think that's a credential that is important to this position?
Yes, I think that it's not that it's the only thing, but we are the sum of our parts. And I am a full complement of everything that I am, and for whatever it's worth. And here, yes, I bring my sensibility as a mother into the full spectrum of what I know as a parent, as an educator, as the daughter of 2 New York City public school teachers, the full complement of all of our experiences, which, by the way, is what you've all been bringing up. This is who we are. More than any other job in New York City, the public advocate with very few resources, and who you like and who you're going to vote for is going to depend on the background of the person.
And Councilmember, do you have any response to that?
Let me just say I've adopted all children in the city of New York, which is why I saved early childhood education when this administration wanted to close it, which is why I fought so hard to keep schools open, which is why I've indicated that we need smaller classroom size and more arts and culture in the city of New York, which is why I've defended, obviously, children who have no lobbyists, children who are not represented by Wall Street, or those who are well-connected and who are well-financed. What we need is a public advocate who can stand up on behalf of working people in the city of New York, not those who are well-heeled or well-connected.
So time's up. So, Ms. Arjani, what would you do to address this
First of all, Kathy,
emergency?
I think my dog Stanley would beg to differ. There's another mother here. But in all seriousness, you don't know our personal situations. And I can't speak for Tish, but I am looking forward to being a mom. And I have 3 nieces who I love. And the reason why I spend so much time on girls with Girls Who Code is because I am so committed to their future and making sure that they have every opportunity in the world. I am surrounded by children every day, and I work hard for them. And I get up every morning and I think...
Yes, I'm sorry, I would like to respond to that since I was directed at twice. Here's the thing, I never shall and I never will back off from every aspect of who I am. And there are people on this stage, as you have all brought up, who are backing back and forth and forward and beyond from who they are, what they've been, what they want to be, and what they shall be. And this piece of who I am happens to be part of who I am. And we are, as I mentioned, the full complement of all of us.
Ms. Arjani, can you answer the question about the hospital?
Answer the question.
In this city, and how would you address that
Yeah, I mean, the closing of hospitals is an epidemic. You know, we've had 13 under this administration and so many more to come. And I support the federal waiver for $10 million so we can keep that here. You know, as the next public advocate, the first thing starts with talking to hospitals. Hospitals don't want to close. but they have a bottom line. And as someone who worked in the private sector, this is where my experience is relevant, and I'm really understanding about the bottom line. How do we keep them open? Because they're closing in poor communities, in communities that need them most. The second thing, as a candidate now, I have reached out to the Coalition for Mobile Health Clinics to talk about what do we do if they do close?
But then how do you keep them open?
How do you keep them open? Well, I mean, I think Bill de Blasio has offered some really good ideas on how we raise more resources and bring more resources into the city to keep them open. We have to find a way.
All right. Well, let's move on to another question, which is somewhat related when you talk about Bill de Blasio's response. He was arrested during a demonstration in June at a protest to protest the closing of Long Island College Hospital. Do you think he misused his position that day? Is there an issue that you feel passionately about that you would be arrested for? I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to answer that, and we'll begin with you, Ms. Guerrero.
I don't think he abused his power or his sort of bully pulpit there. I would get arrested for anything that I believed in, and for anything that a set of New Yorkers who would have been voiceless without me standing in the gap would do so. So no, I would get arrested whenever and however it matched the needs of New York City residents and or that I believed in something that much.
Mr. Squadron.
No, he certainly didn't misuse his office. Long Island College Hospital, as I talked about, is a very personal issue in my district and for the people who I work for, the 321,000 constituents I represent. And certainly there are times when civil disobedience is called for. Particularly when you're talking about core civil rights, basic civil rights. I was proud to be able to vote for marriage equality twice and be a leader in pushing for it. And I'm proud to carry the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, which would extend basic protections to a whole bunch of New Yorkers.
Would you be arrested for something? A passionate issue? Would you be arrested for it?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, great. Ms. Saljani?
Yes, I don't think that he abused his position, and yes, I would be arrested for issues that I feel passionately about. And I feel passionate about poverty alleviation, and the work that I do on STEM education for young women, the work I will do on STEM education for young kids across the city, I feel passionately about. I've been given a chance, and so many of our children are left behind. I feel passionately about undocumented students and immigration. Albany has failed to act. The city council have let these young people down, and I have protested and marched with these young kids, and I will continue to do so because I believe we will all be judged on what we have done on this issue.
Thank you. Ms. James?
Yeah, civil disobedience is a tool that has been used all throughout the history of this country, and particularly during the civil rights struggle. But for a scheduling conflict, I too would have been arrested for the closing of Long Island College Hospital, and have consistently stood on behalf of issues in the city of New York, whether that the LGBT community that was ignored, the stop and frisk abuses, and the list goes on. Civil disobedience, using the right to get arrested, is something that the next public advocate should use, as well as the right to litigate on behalf of New Yorkers whose voices have been left out of the discussion, particularly against special interests and powerful interests in the city of New York.
Ms. James, let me just clarify, though, because you said a scheduling conflict. Are you concerned that any viewers or voters might think, well, it wasn't a priority for you? I just want you to clarify.
So let me just say that it was a priority, and again, I had a scheduling conflict, and unfortunately, I could not get arrested. But clearly, based on issues in the city of New York, during this campaign, there's a number of events that are going out in the city of New York. I've marched. I've stood with Long Island College Hospital. I've gone to all of the meetings on Tuesday night with regards to Interfaith. I have been so intimately involved in the struggle over Long Island College Hospital, Interfaith, labor and delivery, as well as in the Rockaways.
And so, Ms. James, sometimes we know we're just too busy to get arrested sometimes. We're going to shift gears a bit and turn to some of the questions that are coming in via Twitter using the hashtag NYC debates. One viewer just tweeted in to say that all middle-class New Yorkers are struggling to live in New York, not just New York City workers. So what specifically would you do to ensure livable wages for all New York City residents and make New York City more affordable for the middle class? We have a 30-second answer for this, please, and we're going to begin with Ms. Saljani.
Okay, on housing. Public Advocate sits on the city's planning commission. I would end this dance that elected officials do with developers and say that they're for affordable housing and then take their campaign contributions. One. Two, I would, using my position, make sure that any housing that goes up that is truly, truly affordable. On the job piece, we did a telephone town conference, and a woman called me, and she was 58 years old, and she said, I work in cosmetics and I can't find a job. I have already been developing adult coding training programs to make sure that middle-class families that are out of work can learn how to computer program and go get those jobs making $83,000 a year.
Thank you, Ms. Saljani. Time's up. Ms. James?
Sure. In the City Council, I co-sponsored the living wage legislation, the prevailing wage legislation. legislation, the sick leave legislation in the City Council. We need to reform EDC in the City of New York to ensure that any public dollars that go into any projects in the City of New York, that we ensure that we pay workers living wages.
Okay, Ms. Guerrero.
Small business owners get eviscerated by the city that's supposed to protect them with regulations and fines and tickets and over-ticketing, and that's what I would fight, and that's actually something I can do as the next public advocate so that we don't actually, as a city, cut into the profits of our own small business owners. They have nowhere to turn, and yes, New York, I will not have a scheduling conflict when I'm about ready to do that for you.
Senator Squadron.
Look, one of the great challenges of the city over the next 10 years is a city that people can afford to make a life in, that continues to be the greatest engine of opportunity the country has ever known. And the truth is the public advocate comes in where no one else does, comes in for those constituencies, those individuals who don't have anyone fighting on their behalf. And that's why I would have the Office of the Housing Advocate to go after the worst landlords, to help NYCHA tenants, public housing residents organize across the city, to help plan for places where we're going to have more seniors who too often get priced out right as retirement comes along.
All right, time's up.
Right.
All right.
So we have another question that's coming in from Twitter. A member of the Daily News editorial board asks, what's the biggest staff you've ever managed? You have 30 seconds to answer, and we're going to start with you, Councilmember.
So I think when I was in the office of the Attorney General's office, the head of the Brooklyn office, we had in our staff, I believe the last count was 8 individuals. And in my capacity as a member of the City Council, I have in total 7 as well. And so moving forward, obviously I have this experience, the legislative experience, to serve as the next public advocate of the City of New York.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yes, as the Associate Director of the Papal Visit, I managed a core staff of about 10 and hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. And if anyone knows anything about managing a volunteer, it was not only my great blessing to have done so, but quite extraordinary from a management perspective.
Senator?
10 or 15. In the state Senate, in addition to having my district office and work in Albany, I was chair of the Social Services Committee, and we were able to get a great deal of work done for those New Yorkers who most need it: homeless prevention, jobs programs for those who are hardest to employ, and that was about 10 or 15 people altogether.
Ms. Sarjani?
I would also say anywhere between 10 to 15. In the Fund for Public Advocacy, I had a staff of 3, and then we had program managers for every division, as well as interns and volunteers. Right now, I am the founder and the chair of Girls Who Code, where we have program managers in every city that we're in, a teacher that's in every program, countless number of interns and volunteers, and a chair. I am very comfortable with managing and have had a lot of experience doing that already in the office.
All right.
All right, great. We just have a couple minutes left, so we had some lightning round questions we can get to. So here they are. Should Occupy Wall Street protesters be allowed back in Zuccotti Park? We'll start right where we left off.
Yes, and I was proud and honored to work with the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they should be welcomed back. It is a public park.
Ms. Guerrero?
Yes, but we have to make sure that they don't impinge upon the rights of those in the neighborhood. And the neighborhoods that were surrounding Zuccotti Park, I understand and I know from personal experience, had extraordinary times actually getting through, getting to work, getting back, the noise, etc., sanitation. There were problems. There were problems.
Right.
Look, this is my district, so I was very involved in both protecting their right to organize and also very conscious of the cost for the community. A permanent encampment in Zuccotti Park of the kind that we saw by the end last time doesn't make sense. Occupy Wall Street must be able to protest, even in ways that make us a little bit uncomfortable.
And Ms. Guerrero.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Ms.
Sarjani. Sorry.
Absolutely, and I worked with Public Advocate Bill de Blasio to make sure that their rights were protected. You know, freedom of expression is very important, and it's a personal issue for me. You know, my parents were kicked out of their home in Uganda and had to come here as refugees because of who they were. And one of the things that I love about this nation is that it's a democracy, and oftentimes there may be opinions out there that we disagree with, but I was proud to also be very active in the Occupy Wall Street movement to make sure that they're going to be protected, and I welcome them back.
Okay, we have time for one more lightning round question.
All right, wait, before we do that, since Ms. James, you felt you didn't get a chance to ask a question, we would like to offer you that opportunity now in our final.
Okay, thank you. So the question is to Senator Squadron. Dan, you made a pledge when you were running for office that you would oppose housing in a public park. In fact, you were endorsed by Mayor Bloomberg, and then after getting elected, you flip-flopped. You cut a deal with Mayor Bloomberg, and then you built luxury housing in a public park. So the question is, Dan, why was it only luxury housing, and why did you betray your trust to your constituents when you ran for office? And the reality is, I know you're arguing that in exchange for it, you got a pool, but isn't it a fact that a dumpster pool and some amenities that were already included in a public park?
Well, many of the facts in that question simply aren't true. What is true is I was elected and there was a plan for Brooklyn Bridge Park that was a done deal. I had a lot of problems with that plan, including building luxury condos to fund the park. I was able to get into the middle of it, reduce the housing, delay the housing, move the park forward. $65 million for a park is no small thing. The city put that in as part of the conversation we were having. But I want to get past Brooklyn Bridge Park for 1 second. I've also been able to, with Chuck Schumer, whose endorsement I have, get more than $15 million for Pier 42. This is a pier along the East River surrounded entirely by public housing and subsidized housing, exactly the kind of area normally left out of these great parks, and that otherwise would have been left out of the waterfront park that I've done so much work to push forward. So many of the facts in the question weren't true, and I'm really proud that from Brooklyn Bridge Park to Governor's Island to Hudson River Park to the East River waterfront and North Brooklyn, I've been one of the leading voices to push the park forward for more New Yorkers, for more areas.
All right, thank you. Just explain to the candidates, producers looked at the air check. There may have been some confusion, so we afforded you that opportunity.
Thank you very much.
We certainly thank you.
Thank you.
Reshma Saljani, Letitia James, Kathy Guerrero, and Daniel Squadron. Thank you for participating today. That concludes the Democratic Public Advocate primary debate. We certainly thank Jorge Ramos from Telemundo Nueva York and Michael Howard Saul from the Wall Street Journal. And we thank you for watching and for your participation through social media.
And the city's official debate series continues on Wednesday night with the Republican mayoral debate. And the next News 4, Telemundo, Nueva York, Wall Street Journal debates will be held on September 3rd and September 8th. The Democratic candidates will be here at 7 o'clock on the 3rd at 7 p.m. And the Republican candidates will join us at 11:30 a.m. on the 8th.
And we hope you now have a better understanding of the candidates and their position on the important issues that impact the city. Once again, primary day just around the corner, September 10th. Be sure to vote. Have a good afternoon.